The president today, 2,000 miles from Washington, but unable to escape serious questions about what he knew and when about his former national security advisor's lies to the FBI. The president simply saying he feels badly for Michael Flynn.
Hillary Clinton lied many times to the FBI. Nothing happened to her. Flynn lied, and they destroyed his life. I think it's a shame.
Setting aside that James Comey testified Hillary Clinton didn't lie to the FBI, the focus now, did President Trump obstruct justice? And could this tweet be used against him? Quote, I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. The problem? If the president knew Flynn lied to the FBI, and if he did later ask Comey to lay off Flynn, like Comey says, but which the president denies, he could open himself up to accusations of obstruction of justice, charges some Democrats are already raising.
There is a credible case of obstruction of justice against Donald Trump.
Now, a new and controversial defense from the president's personal lawyer. John Dowd tells NBC News he's the one behind the president's tweet, that it's ignorant to say the tweet admitted obstruction. And going even further, he says a president cannot obstruct justice at all because he has every right to express his view of any case. Experts say Dowd may have a legal argument, but politically, a president could still be in trouble. Just ask Richard Nixon or Bill Clinton, who faced impeachment by Congress for obstruction.
The president may not be able to be prosecuted while in office, but it's absolutely relevant whether or not he committed obstruction of justice.
So where does all this go next? That depends on what Mike Flynn is sharing. Convicted, but cooperating. And there's a different tweet that has the president facing fire, too, after he went after the FBI, after reports an agent was taken off the special counsel investigation for sending anti-Trump texts. The president tweeted, the FBI's reputation is in tatters.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.